Now the air was warm, and a pleasant breeze flushed through the air, flushed through your hair. You and Upper Moon 1 were now facing each other. Oh, and what makes you think that you have to say in the results you cannot even defeat yourself? Kokushibo said, his tone remaining unchanged. You stared at him. Because I'm not a demon like you. I am not obedient by any means to follow his orders, you said. A hint of annoyance sparked in your voice as you impazed him. Kokushibo's eyes narrowed as he lunged at you, his sword skillfully swinging at you. You barely dodged him, as his sword skills were incredible, like that of a samurai. Just as you jumped up, dodging the blade, as it was heading towards your ankle, two hands suddenly grabbed you mid-air by the waist and swung you around. A slight gasp escaped your mouth from the sudden feeling of cold around your waist. Despite wearing your uniform and hori, as you were put on the ground, your hands never moved, which caused your head to jolt backwards and to immediately grab the two pale hands to try to remove them, but you couldn't, and out of panic whipped in your head around, only to be met with two crimson eyes and pale skin. No! Was the only thing you could manage to yell before instructively elbowing him in the face. Unfortunately, you missed, as he arched his back to avoid an elbow to the face and ended up knocking the fedora off his head. Muzan made a small tisk before retraining your hands behind your back with one hand, when bending to pick up his fedora and somewhat dust off and place it on his head. He placed one finger to his lips and uttered, "Shush." Immediately, you froze, paralyzed with fear for the demon. He removed his grip from your hands and firmly placed them on your shoulders and slightly leaned over your left shoulder. You really should do what you're told, as I've been very lenient towards you, don't you think? He asked. His voice was low and muffled, but his power and authority absolute made him terrifying to hear in person. You were still frozen, your body not yet adjusted to the firm grip he had on you. You felt an icy breath on the base of your neck as he sighed. Answer when spoken to. Is that clear? He said, as his voice was angrier after tolerating your resisting to submission for so long. Crystal clear, you said, cringing at how weak your voice sounded, even though you hated it. If it meant surviving, then you would just play along. Good. I'm glad we are on the same page now, he said, relaxing his grip on your framed shoulders, yet you were still tensed up at the thought of how easily he could kill you, or worse, turn you into a demon, a cruel and mindless being with no other instructions but to follow Muzan's command and kill any human in sight. Why am I mad? It's because you guys have a short chapter 13, but a long-ass chapter for 14. I love you guys anyways. After a long walk of silence between the upper moon and Muzan, you are now once again in the Infinity Castle. Your eyes were constantly shifting to the constant changing of the structure. If you hadn't followed Muzan or Kokushibo, you could have definitely gotten lost. After a twang was heard, the building interior changed once more. The orangey red lights still emitting a faint glow. The staircase on which you were walking started shifting, causing you to jump to a nearby platform. You stared confused at the missing sight of Muzan and the demon. You looked up, taken aback, when they were both walking completely normally on a staircase turned upside down, hanging above you. After walking for a few minutes in a never-ending building, you were finally halted at a platform. Now it will be daylight soon, and I need something from you, Muzan had said, facing you, and you were standing barely a few inches away from the edge of the platform. I need your blood, as well as you to accompany me in a case more inquired. Understood? He asked, staring at you, making you feel as if he was staring at your soul, or staring right through you. You nodded. It was a perfect chance to find an escape, or at least alert someone. But you knew you had to be smart about it. One mistake, and Muzan would surely kill you. Muzan extended a hand, his eyes not once leaving yours. You took it, gently interweaving your fingers with it, jumping slightly at the sudden drop in temperature. His skin was cold, dead, held lifeless, you thought, staring down at the tone difference in your hands. Suddenly, you were roughly yanked closer to Muzan, a little gasp escaping as you were caught off guard. Your eyes darted to his glowing red eyes. Your body suddenly swelling up in fear. Your heart felt as if it was about to burst through your chest as you scanned his body. His pale features were more now defined, and several veins appeared on his forehead. His lips clearly curved into an angry frown. Never call me lifeless again, he commanded, as a suffocating feeling of anger and fear enveloped the two of you. Is that clear? I refuse to be insulted by a mere human, he said, raising his voice, making you squeak back and shut your eyes, then opening them. You forgot he could read minds. You had to be more careful about your words if you wanted to stay alive. You were slightly shaking and initially screaming at yourself to stop looking so pathetic. He smiled, clearly enjoying this, bringing such raising tension and fear among you. I want you to listen very closely. When I say jump, you ask how high. When I say run, you ask how far. When I command you, you comply with every last word, even if it means your death. Is that clear? I find myself losing patience with you every day. Do not make me waste any more time on you than I need to. Is that understood, my dear? He said. Every inch of you was left feeling defenseless. You hated it. The overwhelming fear and hatred was swallowing you. Yet you never looked up, simply nodded your head, trying to not anger the Demon King any further. Wonderful. I hope you can stay true to your word. At this time, you'll see that you've only been making this difficult for yourself thus far, Muzan said, with motioning for you to follow. With a slight pull at your hand, you quickly followed him. You were then escorted into another room, which had a delicately made kimono. It was fine colors, beautifully bent into forms of spider lilies. No, just very similar looking ones. It was ironic, huh? By the way, the kimono in this book is a black and red one, matching the female Muzan. So, yeah. Change, Muzan spoke, turning his attention back to you. Your eyes widened. There was no way in hell you were going to change in front of a demon. Could I get some privacy, please? You asked, trying to sound as gently polite as you could. He nodded and turned around, leaving the room and sliding two screen doors closed. You felt his presence waiting outside. Slowly growing impatient, you hurried over and rushed to put on the kimono. Just as you finished putting on the kimono, you made your way over to the door, softly pulling them apart. You noticed Muzan was still waiting for you. He moved closer and made his hand go on your head. Your heart was beating faster and faster, trying to escape from your chest. He then pulled a pin out of your hair, which made your hair fall down, naturally starting to form soft waves at the end. Right, follow me, he commanded. After exiting the castle, you walked a few kilometers into the forest until he motioned for you to stop. He then suddenly went behind you and picked you up with both arms. You were instantly, suppressing the urge to bat his hand away, but knew that he was correct earlier. He had been surprisingly patient with you, and you currently didn't want to get on his nerves. In almost an instant, it seemed as if he simply took one step when you were suddenly confronted by the bright city lights. He was incredibly fast. He then set you down on your feet and made you face him. Now, do you see how the sky is turning brighter? He asked, pointing towards the lightened sky as the sun was starting to make its way over the horizon. You nodded. Well, I'm going to take your blood now, so that I can be exposed to the sun, he said, his voice never changing. You nodded, and extending your forearm, he turning over and sliding up the sleeve of the kimono to expose a previously inscribed arm. Muzan took his index finger and made a long, thin cut through above a visible large vein, and you used your other hand to stop yourself from wincing in pain. So you hadn't expected him to cut so deeply. Your arm was starting to feel a sudden burn, accompanied by a feeling of numbness and duration of your vision. For a moment, Muzan took his hand and cupped them underneath, as your dripping arm, collecting the blood in his hands. He brought his hands to his lips and started consuming the deep liquid.